Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my first update on my experience with the Lenovo Legion 7. Now, the specific build that Lenovo sent over for review sports an AMD Ryzen 7 5800H processor, 16 gigs of RAM, a 1 terabyte Western Digital NVMe SSD drive, an NVIDIA RTX 3060 with a max TDP of roughly 130 watts, so that's definitely a good thing, and a 16-inch 2560 by 1600 resolution, 16 by 10, 165 hertz refresh rate IPS panel. And I can tell you right now, it is phenomenal. I really like it. It doesn't make me want to throw my Asus G15 away, but it certainly, I would say, puts it in its place along with the very premium build quality that we get out of this machine. So let's take a look and a listen to that display and the speakers that the Legion 7 has. Brightness is at 100%. This is a matte display, for those of you wondering. And the black bars you see at the top and bottom, letterbox, because again, this is a 16 by 10 aspect ratio. The content is natively 16 by 9. And just to give you an idea of how bright we currently are operating at, that was 50%, and I took it all the way down. Now we can go up to 100%. Things are going to look a little bit more washed out just because it is so bright. This machine is really sharp, and I have to say I am thoroughly impressed. And if nothing goes incredibly wrong, while it may not be perfect, because part of this update you're going to hear some things that obviously, as happy as I've been with the brief encounter, perfection is really unattainable in every element of life. But still, the sum of the parts here, really impressive. Build quality, fantastic. Keyboard, very good, as you would expect from Lenovo. Love the integration of the numerical pad. We still have, I think, a very large touchpad. It is glass, precision drivers, performance is great. And then on top of all of that, I don't feel like they cut any corners. The I/O on this machine is very good. The backlighting of the keyboard is very good. Now, keep in mind with that backlight that, you're seeing a little bit of it in play, but we have Corsair iQ under the hood, and you can implement that if you so choose. I personally am not a huge fan of it, but for the gamers out there that want RGB heaven to occur, I find it a little bit too much. It actually is distracting. It is really impressive, even if it isn't for me. Let's take a quick look at a video with some dialogue. I'm going to give you one of mine. We'll go to the unboxing and just, again, take a listen. This isn't going to be so clear. You have some video game play from Far Cry 6. They're forcing us to watch. Thank you, Microsoft. Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing and first mention, so it's already been opened, nothing new about that. I think the speakers are good, they're not phenomenal. And then on the right side, a privacy switch. Love the privacy switch. No Type A ports, by the way, on the side of this chassis. All of that action is in the back. We essentially just have the privacy switch on the right, Type C on the right, and then another Type C on the left, and a headphone microphone combo jack. Another Type C port. So all good, really clean, but this is where all the action is. And I love the industrial design that Lenovo incorporated here. Predominantly aluminum. I thought the deck might have been made of some sort of plastic or polycarbonate, but I can tell you every single day when I go to boot this thing up, it hasn't been that many days, but enough to give impressions, this is icy cold. Even though I'm in a climate, granted I've got AC blasting, that is the opposite of cold. So definitely they've got an aluminum blend on the deck too. Build quality is much better, in my opinion, than my G15, but it does come at the expense of being a heavier machine. And that's not the only difference. I probably will do a comparison to my G15 as soon as I actually can. As soon as I've spent enough time with this machine to have more than what I'm giving today. But there's the back I/O, as I mentioned, 3 Type A ports, HDMI. It is not HDMI 2.1 to my knowledge, the proprietary charging port, but I haven't tried to game on this externally. With a 3060, that's not going to really be a perfect world here. That's something I'll get to a little bit later. And then, of course, power delivery we have on the back of this machine. So if you don't want to use the included 300-watt brick, you don't have to. You can go ahead and use a 65 or 100 watt. Granted, it will be much slower to charge, but still nice to have on such a powerhouse. And this is still a powerhouse. People who are saying this build is not so powerful, if this is the low end of what the Legion 7 represents, well then really exciting stuff is coming with the 3070, 3080, and additional CPU options. So let's go ahead and get out of this. Let's talk about benchmarking, some light benchmarking at least. You can see time spy right here, 8712. This is really impressive for, let me take the brightness down, it's a little too bright. This is really impressive for, again, a 3060 machine. Even with that high TDP, keep in mind that my Asus G15 is benching now with all, of course, up-to-date drivers, over 9400, 9444, I think was my last benchmark. So it's a significant difference, but remember, the 3070 in my Asus G15 is pulling less wattage than this 3060. So that is holding it back. Also remember that, you know, the G15 is lighter. Remember that the G15 has a more powerful processor. So there are a lot of things at play, but I think considering we've got a Ryzen 7 5800H and a 3060, this is fantastic. In fact, this may be one of the best 3060 performers on the market right now. And when you couple in the build quality and the display quality, I don't know, it's hard to go wrong with this machine. Even if it comes out at a retail of about $1,700 and then that price drops, I think this is going to be an absolute winner. That's just, again, my initial impression with it. And, you know, I'll eventually get to a comparison. There's that read-write performance, as I was talking about with the Western Digital NVMe SSD. No reason to upgrade that. I also say that because if you've caught anyone else's coverage on YouTube, which I've taken a peek at as well to see other people's impressions, not too much on YouTube besides myself. There's a handful of, I think, respectable humans that are doing their thing with this. Everybody's having problems opening this thing up, and I don't know if I even want to bother. So maybe I'll take a shot at that, maybe I won't, but this tells you what you need to know, which is the 1 terabyte NVMe in here. You really don't need to upgrade it. Now, if you need more capacity, I understand there is a second slot. There's a reason to get inside. Keep in mind, though, external drives, easy to hook up, and even though this doesn't have Thunderbolt connectivity, it is an AMD build, you still do have great throughput, so be aware of that. Now, moving away from that, let's talk about the Corsair iQ, because this is something I feel like people are going to want to know about. You're going to want to, when you receive your machine, if it hasn't already updated to the latest version of iQ, do yourself a favor. There's been a lot of talk about disabling iQ in order to get better battery life. I haven't really seen that come together, and this is where I now touch on battery life. The battery life is its weak spot, but if you're buying this to use it as a desktop replacement, which I think is completely practical and makes sense, then that probably is not going to be relevant to you. Another thing I want to point out is that while we're operating right here, we are not in the silent profile, but the machine is almost completely silent. So again, kudos to Lenovo for build quality, display quality, and the cooling. I mean, everything here seems to be exactly what a modern desktop replacement should be without getting into the 17-inch class notebook. In terms of the keyboard, take a look. So right now, what you can't see is the RGB that's lit on the front LED that runs around the chassis, all of the ventilation as well. And I can go ahead and give you a quick look at that just so you do see it, but I did show this in previous videos. I mean, is it for everyone? Absolutely not. And that's why the beauty of this machine is that you can just turn it off, which is exactly how I would use it every single day, because anyone who follows my channel knows that I have no interest in glowing RGBs all the time. I mean, I think they have their place, but I think that this is really just such a clean industrial look. Why muddy it up? And that's what I really do respect about it, is that it's just as comfortable incognito, if I could speak, as I would put it, that you could take this into a room without being embarrassed. And then if you wanted to geek out, go to town on your RGB parade, and you can do it. But it's pretty cool. I mean, I can't knock it. Do a lot of other laptops do this? Yes. Do a lot of them do it with the Corsair iQ? No. And that's what's, I think, quite nice about this machine. And that's because I use iQ in my custom desktop build as well. So that's another thing to be aware of. So just cycling through some presets, nothing crazy here, but wanted to show that off to all of you that are wondering. Now, moving away from Corsair iQ, I'll leave it on the Rainbow Wave. Why not? Another thing I wanted to discuss, of course, was gaming. And if you've been waiting, I finally will address it. Now, this is really early. I haven't done enough to say this is my final verdict, but in launching Cyberpunk and playing it, it seems like I'm pulling natively with everything maxed out, meaning native resolution of this machine, 2560 by 1600, 165 hertz. I'm getting a little over 30 frames per second. Now, what that tells me is that, and I've tested it already, with most modern AAA titles that are GPU intensive, like Cyberpunk and others, you are going to have to step things down from the native resolution if you want to get best gameplay, obviously. But when it comes to titles like Rust, even Call of Duty World War II, as well as any older titles like Counter-Strike, CSGO, you name it, as long as it's something that's more of a CPU, GPU balance, blend, as opposed to, again, Cyberpunk or Red Dead's another good one, then you are basically going to be able to play those titles at native resolution and refresh with everything pretty much maxed out. But when titles get really heavy on this machine, that's where you're going to have to step it down to either 1200p from 1600 or even 1080p, and then you will get exactly what you want out of this. So I think that's pretty good. A lot of people knocking that this is the weak build in the Legion 7 lineup, but considering what I just told you, that's very far from weak. In fact, it's surprisingly powerful for the CPU-GPU combo that it has. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that this machine stays relatively cool and delivers a lot of power to its components. So the rundown so far is great display, great keyboard, great build quality, great I/O, just not great battery life. And most of the aesthetic on gaming laptops like this, I'm not a big fan of. Lenovo, on the other hand, I think they did a really good job. And by the way, this is not a sponsored or promoted video. I'm not paid in any way. If I were, I would disclose it. After all, I am a student of journalism, for those of you that are new to the channel. So everything's always going to be clear and in context as it should be. And yeah, Lenovo just did a great job here. And if I was in the market for a laptop right now, my eyes would probably be locked on the Legion 7. If you can't wait, you can't wait. But if you can, the luxury is yours. Again, love the privacy switch for the webcam. That's something I'm not seeing enough of on gaming laptops. But it's happening, so that's a good sign. Wish the speakers were a little bit better, but I mean, I'm nitpicking at this point. Whether or not you like Lenovo, that's a matter of personal preference. I haven't had any bad experiences with them, and this machine pretty much exudes everything that I'd want from a gaming as well as 4K video editing machine, photo editing machine, and I just really like the styling. And it's not a fingerprint magnet, a little bit heavy as I stated, but it is larger than my G15, and I do really prefer all of those ports at the back of the entire machine. It's just, in my opinion, optimal, easily opened with a single hand for those of you that are wondering. And I will do a gaming demo for this in all likelihood. The fact of the matter is that if you can get this sort of performance from the 3060 build, just imagine what the 3070 and 3080 are going to be capable of. And you can easily cycle the power mode, something I did not do. Let me just jump into that for a second. Function, you can see it designated right here, function and Q. Now, because we're not hooked up to the power brick, we cannot go into the high performance mode. So just, something to be aware of. If we were, you can easily go into it. And then inside of Lenovo's, get this back in frame for you, control center, Lenovo Vantage, you can see your CPU utilization, the SSD, the video RAM for your GPU, and essentially everything that you could want to play with inside of the system. So I think they give a pretty good suite here. I mean, I was in no way disappointed by what Lenovo put together. Let's go ahead and just do a system update check right now, even though I have recently done this. I'll just check it one more time. As I stated, the Wi-Fi 6 chipset on here has performed well. No issues with that. Again, battery life is the only thing. Like right now, we're at 54%. And let's see if it's estimating anything. It's not giving me an estimate at present, but you know, it's something. It's giving me the optional AMD VGA driver. It looks to me like the realistic battery life on this is 3 to 4 hours. Now, hopefully I revise that and I tell you we can do better. I know other reputable YouTubers have said disabling IQ fixes that. I haven't experienced that. So, but if I do, you can be sure I'm going to relay it to all of you, because if you haven't noticed already, I really like this laptop. The one thing it is missing is an SD card reader. Why Lenovo wouldn't include that, I don't know. The machine is big enough, certainly beefy enough, and that's the one thing. It wouldn't prevent me from buying it, but it's the one thing it's missing from it making it almost perfect for me. And of course, I would love to have Thunderbolt, but I would need an Intel version of this build, wouldn't I? Other than that, again, really solid. I love the build quality. It's something I wish my G15 had. And if you're wondering how I think it fares compared to the G15, as I've stated, be sure that comparison is coming sooner than later. I just have to get to a comfort level with my experience that I can actually tell all of you impressions that are going to be accurate. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, even if all of you would love to know whether or not I think one is better than the other. Right now, what I can tell you is that as impressed as I am with this, I'm not feeling any tremendous buyer's remorse with my G15, because my G15 is still really, really good, and it's significantly lighter than this laptop. But that does come at the expense of build quality. That pretty much rounds out my initial impressions of the Lenovo Legion 7, at least with the Ryzen 7 5800H and the RTX 3060. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.